AICC's Leadership in Focus series. Can you tell us a little bit about your relationship with the AICC and how you started out with the Chamber?
Yeah, so we started out with the Chamber quite early on in the Blue Chili's journey. We got invited to attend one of their trade missions to Israel. It was the Venture Capital Trade Mission. And the idea here was to experience what is it about Israel that's made it one of the prominent ecosystems in the world around venture capital, around startups and digital technology. And so I jumped at the chance, and from there we became members, and we've supported various programs. I've been back twice, and yeah, I see it as a fantastic organisation to be part of, and we've certainly got a lot of value out of our membership, and I think they have too.
Having participated and hosted a hackathon with Assistant Minister for Innovation, Wyatt Roy MP, in 2015, what was your reaction to the government's innovation statement released earlier this year, especially in regards to the championing early stage ventures?
Yeah, so we, when Wyatt Roy got announced as Assistant Minister for Innovation, he gave me a phone call literally that afternoon. And said, look, I'm thinking of getting this idea together, getting people together, people from government, from startups, a bit of a roundtable session, what do you think? And I thought, well, why don't we use a startup method, like hackathon? And I reckon we could apply the standard tech hackathon model to coming up with policies. And so we thought, let's do it. And true to the spirit of entrepreneurship and startups, we organised the whole thing in 3 weeks. Got the whole thing up off the ground. We had 200 people here at Blue Chili, and we hosted this hackathon that I think worked really, really well, where from a field of hundreds of ideas that were sort of crowdsourced in a couple of weeks leading up to it, we worked on the top 10 ideas and got the whole community of entrepreneurs, venture capital, technologists, data researchers, but also government and bureaucrats, which is the important thing, to work together on working out how can we bring these ideas together and make them work. Now, the cool thing on the back of that is many of those ideas and the concepts later became instrumental policies as part of the ideas boom. So when the ideas boom and the innovation statement came out, we weren't that surprised because we were part of the process leading up into it, and the community was part of the process, which I think is a very powerful thing, that we actually engage the community in a very short amount of time to actually come up with some stuff that's actually going to work and assist. I think the innovation statement goes a long way to support a lot of the problems that we have in Australia, a lot of the opportunities that can be exploited. However, there is a lot more that needs to be done, and we need to translate what is now words into actual actions.
There is now a further need for more experts in the innovation industry to help cut through the confusion of the government's offerings, including new funding models. In what way does Blue Chili and other startup hubs work with entrepreneurs and the government for the best outcomes?
So Blue Chili's model is quite unique. In fact, on a global sense, we're unique. And one of the defining factors that makes us different and makes us powerful is the fact that we partner with non-technical entrepreneurs, people with strong business and marketing experiences, and we provide the investment as technology into all of these startups. So that puts us on a completely different level to other parties, not just in Australia, but around the world. And so we see our role as supporting the 95% of the population who can't code, not necessarily supporting the 5% who can, because they're well supported. There's lots of models around there. We want to work with people who have strong business ideas, strong marketing backgrounds. More importantly, their unique IP, or their secret sauce, if you like, is an understanding of an industry they've been working on. And so what Blue Chili does is we partner with them by providing the technology to get their business launched and off the ground.
When you met with Avi Hasson, Israel's chief scientist, in early 2015, you noted that there was no ceiling for startup investment in Israel. Do you believe this is creating a problem in Australia's startup ecosystem?
When I met with the chief scientist back last year, it was actually I asked a very naive and what turned out to be a very Australian question. When we were discussing one of the government's initiatives, which is to provide tax exemption for high net worth individuals who want to make angel investments, so investments in early stage startups. And basically the idea here was that you could claim a deduction on tax equal to the amount that you're putting in. And so my naive question, which I asked in front of everyone, was, what's the limit? What's the ceiling on this? And he looked at me incredulous and goes, why would we want a limit? We look at this as, as a charity. This is supporting our ecosystem. Why would we want to cap that or stop that? If someone wants to put $100 million investment into 100 different, $100 million into 100 different startups, I want to let them do that. And I think it's that approach of thinking big, even though they're a small economy in a small country, It's their ability to think like a big economy, a macro level economy, that makes them quite powerful. I think in Australia, we are just big enough to be able to support ourselves, particularly in the startup sense, but we're still small on a global scale. And that puts in a bit of a challenge for entrepreneurs here, because we can make a successful business just being in Australia. We're not necessarily pushed to think big and go outside. And we see the same thing with corporates, the same thing with governments as well as startups. So I think one of the challenges we have is to adopt this big country way of thinking, this big economy way of thinking, even though we are a small economy. And the sooner we can do that, the sooner we'll end up having the same successes as our big friends overseas.
Do you believe that's something that's ingrained in Israel people from a very young age?
Yeah, so Israel has a lot of characteristics that defines it and has made it an economy that that others are now trying to emulate. There's also a lot of things about it we don't necessarily want to or can emulate. So one of the things, for example, is they've got neighbours around them that aren't necessarily friends with them. You could argue that's a bit different. I think we have a bit of a relationship with New Zealand, but generally on the same sort of side most of the time. And that sort of fear and that encroachment of their foreign neighbours provides a very strong culture of empowerment within Israel itself. So they're very, very supportive themselves. So they work very closely together. I also think that the military aspect as well, the compulsory military service that all people in Israel do between the ages of 18 and 20 is a very powerful thing, again, to bring people together and also to teach them skills of discipline, of getting shit done, of working with limited resources to be able to achieve something, which we don't get in Australia. In Australia, think about what 17, 18-year-old people do once they leave school. They go to schoolies, they take a year off, and they explore the world. In Israel, they're put into a very arduous situation. They're forced to think on their feet. They're forced to work together as teamwork, and they're also forced to be able to develop themselves professionally. And it's that culture that happens at a very young age is very powerful. Another element which sort of cascades earlier is because everyone is going to go to military service, you have a choice. You don't have a choice to go, but you have a choice in what you achieve or where you're going to go. And that is based on academic performance. So suddenly you now have an incentive for kids to study STEM subjects at school. So science, tech, engineering, and maths. Because the better you do at those subjects, the cooler the positions in the military you'll get. So if you don't do well, you can be, you can be sitting on the front line at a guard post, 24/7, which I can tell you from experience, because I'm ex-military, is a shit job and it's boring. Or if you do well and you study well and you're able to achieve, you can go to one of the elite units and you can work on new emerging technologies, or you can develop new technologies, and you can work in the spy sectors, which is arguably much more fun, which means you've got now this very powerful incentive for kids to do well in the STEM subjects, because they have a choice. Do you want to be standing at the guard post 24/7, or do you want to be working on this cool stuff? And obviously, they want to work on the cool stuff, which makes for a very competitive and healthy environment and gets more kids into STEM.
As the innovation sector continues to grow, how can entrepreneurs avoid third-party intermediaries that may try to take a foothold in business partnerships?
Now, partnerships and relationships, be it personal, be it business, are all the same. You need to know who you're getting in bed with. So you need to do your research. Now, I'm not going to go into the personal dating side of things, but in business, it means doing your research, understanding, what services and what things offer to ensure that you don't get burnt. The innovation statement is going to create a lot of activity in this space. A lot of people are going to want to get into it. And a lot of people have a lot of value to add, and this is going to enable them to do so, and that's a good thing. But like any industry or any partnerships, entrepreneurs need to be doing their own research to find out what works for them, because what works for them may not be applicable to someone else, and vice versa.
You've stated the importance of looking at customer investment rather than focusing primarily on corporate investment. Why should startups move in this direction?
At the end of the day, startups are businesses, and businesses survive when they make money. And I know it sounds like ridiculous in the startup world to be talking about businesses that make profit and revenues, but ultimately I think startups that work on getting customers acquisitions and driving revenues are ultimately going to be more successful than those that don't. And so at Blue Chili, we have a strong focus on customers, and we believe that the most important thing for a startup isn't capital, it's customers. Because if you have customers and you're making sales and you're making revenues, you can then get the capital. And the capital will actually chase you at that point because you're a profitable company. So having a focus on revenue and sales and customers, I think, is a very healthy way to build ultimately what is a business.
Being involved in Club Kidpreneur, which aims to teach basic business skills to children, How do you think Australia can continue to foster and develop a nation of entrepreneurship?
I believe to get more kids into STEM and into entrepreneurship, we need to inspire them. We need to give them a reason to do so. Now, in Israel, as I mentioned before, one of the reasons that you can get them into kids into STEM subjects is because they have a choice later in life, whether they can go into one of the elite units in the military service or go to one of the other services. So that's their inspiration. In Australia, we don't have compulsory military service, and I don't necessarily think we should. So we need something else. Now, if you look at what happens at sort of 10 to 12 years old in school is when kids start getting influenced by celebrity factors. And if you look at who the celebrities and brand ambassadors that exist for them now, we've got media personalities, we have sporting stars, we have people on TV. They aren't necessarily entrepreneurial. So I believe that if you want to encourage kids to get into STEM subjects, you need to give them something that's cool and inspiring to strive to do. Club Kidpreneur, an organisation I've been involved with right from the beginning, aims to do just that very, very early on, sort of 7, 8, 9 years old, where it provides skills and practical teachings on how to be an entrepreneur, how to run a micro business, which in Club K's case is essentially a small market stand at a market. But it gives them those skills and resources. So when they go through high school, they've always got that learning in the back of their head that reminds them, look, you can do something else. There is another future for you if you want to. And I think that's very powerful. But we as a country still need to provide awesome ambassadors, if you like, for entrepreneurship. And I think the way to do that is to have every entrepreneur has a role to then give back to the kids to become that inspiration. Go back to their original schools, wherever it may be. In my case was Hobart. Go back and talk to the students coming through and say, look, this is what I did. And it's pretty cool. It's a lot of fun. And you can do the same thing. It's to give them that role model to follow.
Uncertainty can be a huge factor for startups, including investor risk and developing a sense of empowerment. What aspects of your Defence Force training do you believe help startups to conquer the industry?
Military is really good at teaching various skills in life. And at Blue Chili, we've adopted a lot of my learnings as a former Navy officer and applied it to early stage venture. I was a Navy engineer, I was a weapons engineer, and in military engineering, there are two key factors that sort of all decisions are made around. And one of those is understanding and mitigating risk. And the second one is controlling the supply chain. And we've taken both these elements and applied it to Blue Chili. I'll talk about what they mean. So on the risk aspect, it's pretty simple. It's about identifying what are all the areas why a startup will fail, and then providing mitigation or a model to reduce the risk. You can never remove risk, you can never mitigate and reduce it. And an important distinction here is how military looks at risk versus, say, business. I didn't have a business background or training, I only even knew military, so for me this was just logical, but it's actually fundamentally different. And the reason it's different is because in the military, the option of not doing something is taken from you. And so you assess risk in a very different way. You're in a business context. The way you look at risk is you try and work out all the reasons why something will fail and you assess it against doing nothing or doing what you're doing already. And the stereotype of the big heavy corporate ship that's hard to turn around is an embodiment of that. You capture those risks, you throw it into a business case, you offset it against the positives, and you make a decision or not to go ahead and do that. It could be an acquisition, investment, or whatever. But in military, by removing the option of not doing something, you're assessing risk fundamentally differently. Rather than being a defensive, how is all this going to go wrong, you look at it as, okay, we're going to do it, so what's the best way of doing it? It's a very subtle difference, but it has a very profound effect. So, we are going to go over that hill. We are going to get that weapon system working. We are going to take that out, whatever. Like, you don't have a choice, you have to do it. So you assess the risks and you make a decision and you empower people to make that decision. So we've taken that into the startup world. We've identified the 5 key risks of startups, being team, technology, traction, tender to keep my alliteration going, and timing. And we've built a business model around each of those 5. So that's a very powerful thing I've taken from the military and applied it to early stage venture and startups. And I think that appreciation of risk and therefore tolerance of fail and empowerment of people is something all startups can learn. On the supply chain, the business context of supply chain is vertical integration. In military and defense materiel, what you do is when you're acquiring a new platform like a warship, you're looking at everything from I have a need for a new platform, all the way through to how do I dispose of it after I'm done with it, which could be 50, 60 years. In startups, it's I have an idea and I need to exit, I need to sell. So we at Blue Chili aim to control every single element along that supply chain. And when you combine those two elements together, the mitigation of risk in that approach and the supply chain management, you end up with a very powerful model that de-risks startups and provides everything an entrepreneur needs to do to build a business, scale it, raise capital, and then ultimately exit.
You stated that Australia had already fallen behind other countries as a startup economy. Do you believe that we'll be able to catch up to countries like Britain and Israel in the near future?
I think if Australia aims to copy another ecosystem, we'll always be second. We as a country need to find our own identity, our own thing that we're huge for and well known for. And for a long time, it was coal energy. So I actually believe it'd be a very brave, leadership or government to be able to stand up and saying, we're going to be the leading expert in clean technology. So we're going to take our experiences in energy, but we're going to shift it and focus on clean tech. And that's what we're going to be known for. I think one of the issues with the innovation statement is that it's all about innovation. And innovation itself is kind of an intangible thing. I actually believe it's an output of a strong culture. It's not a thing. Despite our best efforts, we can't productize innovation. We can't say, I want to buy 4 innovations, please. It's not a product. It's an intangible output and a result. And it needs a vision. Like any intangible, it needs clarity and direction. And I think Australia has a golden opportunity to be able to take something like clean tech, actually doesn't matter what it is, and say, we are going to be the world leaders in clean technology. And that means that anyone who wants to study any sort of science or engineering degree that has something to do with that Australia-wide mission and vision, you don't pay anything for those education. Anyone that brings IP into the country, we'll fund the cost of transferring the IP. Anyone that sets up a company here pays less tax if it's aligned with that, or whatever. You create these incentives that aligns with the vision. You become globally recognized for it, and everyone will flock to you with this idea because you are the central point in the world. And I honestly believe Australia had a golden opportunity to do this, and Saudi Arabia has beaten us to it. So there is evidence that you can have a global vision like that. And you can move from a oil or coal-based economy to a more service-based and idea economy, like Israel has done, with human capital. But we need that strong leadership and vision and a very strong, clear idea of what it is that we're trying to do.
What an interesting point to end on. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sebastien, for the AICC and the CEO Magazine's Leadership in Focus series.
Thank you, Sky.